Dev Rugne is the Assistant State Director of Mufon, Northern California. She has had over 45 years of experience in UFO research and independent investigative, as I said, research. She became interested in UFOs at a very early age and has had many experiences with UFOs. Her main interest has been the abduction phenomenon. Dev recently released a book titled UFO Investigator. Her story is a really fascinating one and she's joining us now. Hi Dev, how are you?
Hi, how you doing, Dean? Thank you for having me.
Great, pleasure to have you. What makes people who are more than just interested in UFOs become a UFO investigator?
Well, like I was stating in my book, we want to try to find out what this phenomenon is. And for me, it was a lot more than just finding out what it was. There were events in my life that were taking place and seemed to mirror a lot of the witnesses that were my cases, as far as sightings and certain experiences. And becoming an investigator for MUFON really put me in the driver's seat because they have a massive database and they're pretty well known. They've been established since 1969. And so a lot of people who have had some kind of experience or sighting either find out about MUFON or know of them, know that they can report with us. So that gives an investigator a lot of information and research to do within the database. That really hit home for me because prior to joining MUFON, early in my teenage years, I was really delving deep into the research. And this was prior to the internet. So I had the library, I had magazines, you know, to try to learn more about this phenomenon. And, you know, I tried to get the word out that I was interested in this subject so that people would know that they could talk to me and know that I, you know, wouldn't laugh at them. Because, you know, back in the 70s, it was a very laughable subject. A lot of people really made fun of me.
Right.
Based on the fact that I believed UFOs were real. And so trying to get cases on your own, especially back in the early days, was hard, you know, to get the word out. I didn't have the internet. There wasn't any way to really get out there except for just to talk to people. And, you know, I kind of did that at work as well. And, you know, and like in the book, it states that I spoke with a man that was in the Navy back when I was working at Peterbilt Motors.
That was in 1979?
Yeah, in 1979, I was working at Peterbilt Motors, and I had actually met another guy that was interested in UFOs, and we started to talk, and I guess he spoke to some other people as well, and then I remember somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, there's a guy on first shift that wants to talk to you." And I said, "Oh, really? Okay." So I came in early and spoke with him, and he just said, "You know, I had an experience on a ship when I was in the Navy, and he wanted to tell me about it." And it was quite fascinating. And, you know, so this kind of thing of getting the word out by mouth didn't really do a lot. And so, you know, joining MUFON really opened it up because you have a lot of people that are reporting. So now you have all these cases that you can investigate, you can research, that was the best part about being a part of MUFON.
I mean, I have had a lot of people that have said to me, "I'd love to become a UFO investigator. I might go and work for MUFON." And I say, "Well, hang on a minute. It's more a passion-driven thing than a paid thing, isn't it?" And as soon as they realise they're not being paid, they go, "Oh, really?" so those guys and gals that are investigators for MUFON and doing it with just on passion, I applaud them.
Absolutely. You know, when I was coming out of high school, my dad was like, "Okay, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to go to college? Are you going to go to work? What is your plan?" And he knew I was interested in UFOs, and I was also interested in astronomy. So, but I had told him I'd love to be a UFO investigator, but my dad was a businessman.
Mm-hmm.
And when he heard that, he was
not impressed,
not happy. He kind of rolled his eyes and goes, "That's a hobby. I'm talking about life. I'm talking about a job. I'm talking about money, how to, support yourself." And that's where Betty Hill came in. I had reached out to her, and she was so graciously talked with me. And, I was quite young. This was around 1977 when I spoke to her on the phone. And she really just kind of comforted me into knowing that follow your dreams, do it what makes you happy. And you want to investigate UFOs, do it,
mm-hmm.
And that really hit home for me.
Yeah.
I was a kid and I was trying to, figure it all out. So she and I had a couple of correspondence. We wrote a couple of letters. I still have those letters. She sent me a Christmas card. It was really nice. So I really attribute her to really me taking this forward with seriousness.
Yeah, and just let me interrupt. And for those people who aren't aware who Betty Hill is, of course, the other half of Betty and Barney Hill, of course, they basically were the test subject or the test case for alien abduction back in 1961. They were the first to really make the news.
Yeah. I think when I think back and talking with her in those early days and knowing that she was in the front right there with, the media, the news media, that had to be, I think, a little stressful. I mean, I think I would have personally that would have been hard to really, it's hard to put yourself out there. And when I wrote this book, I did leave out a couple of things that were personal. I wrestled with myself of whether I should put it down and have it in writing forever.
Yeah.
And, when I wrote this book, I tried to pick out at least 50 cases that I wanted to profile. Of course, it took a long time. This was 2.5 years in the making, because to make some of those stories flow in chapters 3 through 6, which are my actual cases,
mm-hmm.
That I investigated and interviewed those people, I had to go back and contact them because I realized I needed a little bit more information as I was writing up like the storyline, the event section, and I wanted to really have it flow. So I had to get back in contact with some of these people, and it had been a few years on some of those cases, and then some I wasn't able to contact because they no longer had that phone number or email valid anymore. So
right.
I wasn't able to get in contact with them again. But this was a personal thing for me, and that's why in the title it says a personal look into
Yeah.
the circumstance
Right. Right.
and stuff. So it's when you put yourself out there, and I'm kind of on the shy side when it comes to like interviews and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought of Betty just having her life plastered, all over the media in those early days. Oh,
Could you
and I
imagine?
know how it's like.
Yeah.
Yeah, because people weren't embracing that subject early on in those
No,
days.
well, could you imagine back then if social media was around back then? I mean, it would have been 100 times harder to come out and talk about this stuff.
Yeah, because sometimes it's not all embracing and love.
No.
But yeah, so when you're dealing with putting out, if this book was just about my cases, it wouldn't have been personal at all. It would just been, as an investigator, cases that I did.
Yeah.
But I included my life and what I felt drove me to become an investigator in my early life. Something had happened, and so uh, you know, as an investigator and talking with hundreds and hundreds of people, because I've done almost 900 cases in about 12 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm very successful, pretty successful about getting a hold of these people. Sometimes, people are not available to talk, or they're on vacation, or what have you. And sometimes these people put in these cases not realizing that we're going to contact them.
Right.
So I did have a lot of success in actually contacting them and interviewing them. So when you start to look at putting these cases together, it's time consuming, especially for the book. But I had decided to include myself, because a lot of these people, when I was speaking with them about their sighting, I would end the conversation by saying, well, that's all the questions that I have. Is there anything else that you would like to add that we haven't covered, or any questions for me, as an investigator? And so, they did many, many times ask me, oh, have you seen anything? And I'd say, well, yes, and a lot of times that made them feel good
Yeah.
that we were in the same boat.
Well, yeah. I mean, but I mean, Chuck Sikowski mentioned to me that a good investigator won't go into a case, agreeing with everything the witness is talking about. He likes to go into a case with that little dose of skepticism, and then to prove and let the witness explain to him what happened, before he can kind of decide, which way to tackle it. But the skepticism always help.
Well, yes, because, first and foremost, as an investigator, you're listening to the witness give you their testimony of what they saw. And I always go with a chronological timeline. What were you doing prior to seeing it? And then when you, like, if they said, well, I went out in the backyard and had a cigarette. Well, how long were you out there before you saw something or noticed anything? And what made you notice it? That kind of thing. And then what happened? And then what happened? So we're getting that timeline so that they can relive it in their mind and not forget anything, because that sequence of events is important.
Yeah.
And you let them tell you what they saw, what they experienced, what they felt. Regardless how it sounds, you're just taking notes. You're getting all that fact. You're getting the witness testimony. And after confirming elevation, time, date, direction, distance, after that interview, and I always leave it open to where, if I have any additional questions, can I contact you again? And, like I'll always say, is this a cell phone? I'd like to know if I could do a quick text to you and say, oh, I have a couple more questions. Are you available? You know, so I always try to make sure that if that's a cell phone that we're talking on, because a lot of times people don't have time to be answering telephone calls, and if they don't recognize that number, they're not going to answer you.
Yeah.
So that's important to me to know if I'm talking to them on a cell phone. But it's not until after I get all that information that I'll sit down and really think about all that information, right? We're taught that we're trying to find out what it's not. I can't tell you what it is that they saw.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to see, well, is it an airplane? Was it moving from a certain direction, a certain height, you know, visibility as far as, was there wings? Was there noise, you know, like an engine sound? Was it a helicopter? Because if it's hovering, you can hear the helicopter. There's lights, navigational lights. So we're trying to find out what it's not. Is it an airplane? Is it a balloon, helicopter, drone, the planet Venus? This kind of thing. So we're eliminating what the conventional things it could be.
Yeah.
And when we exhaust all of that, when we realize, well, it's not this because it's doing that, or it's not doing this, then we come up with an unknown. What that unknown is, I don't know.
Because we haven't had disclosure yet, so no case is ever closed, is it?
Well, we weren't there. Number one, we're trying to get as much information. And even if and I have had many UFO sightings, and I can tell you, these things that I see, I'm like, these are unknowns, because I know enough. And as being an investigator, I'm already checking these things off in my mind when I'm watching an unknown object, right?
Yeah.
So do I know what that was? No, I don't. And I was the witness.
Right.
So
right.
I can't prove that it was man-made or something else, right? I mean, it is an unidentified object or phenomenon. I'm old school. I like to use UFO.
Right.
Today, in today's world, it seems like UAP is the acronym to use. An unidentified aerial phenomenon. Now, I've seen unknown craft. So to me, it's not really a phenomenon to me. It's an object. I've seen a craft that is unexplainable to this investigator. So I like using UFO. Now, when I do use UAP, it's maybe like a portal opening up in the sky. If someone saw something that they said seemed to shimmer, and like there's an opening in the sky, and they've seen objects coming in and out of it or hovering about it, I would say that to me is more of a UAP.
Right.
Because we're not sure what that is. I mean, to us, it could be a portal opening up to another dimension. Can I prove that? Not really. But we have our descriptions,
I think unexplainable is a better word, in the U for UAP, because that's basically what it is. You can't explain what you saw.
Right.
Yeah. Dev, do you have to be does it help to be an experiencer to become a good investigator?
I really believe that in any job that any person takes on, whether they're getting paid or not, if you have the passion, if you really like what you're doing, for 20 years, I worked for a robotics company. I loved what I did. And yes, I got paid, but I loved what I did. So you really work hard at doing your job the best that you can. And as an investigator, whether you've seen, I have investigators that have never seen a UFO, but their passion is there, and they're good. They're good investigators because they do their research. They try to find out what happened on that day in that area. You know, they'll use the internet. They'll use certain websites like Heavens Above to identify any satellites that were in the area of the sky. They'll use an astronomy program to see what planets or meteors or anything that was occurring. So, you know, these investigators that have not had an experience or a sighting are very good because they're dedicated and they're not getting paid. So they're dedicated. They have a passion for it. They want to know a lot more about this phenomenon. So they're giving it their all. And I commend them because there isn't anything other than their passion driving them.
Yeah. Can you remember your first case?
My first case that someone came to me was in 1976. And she was in Fremont, California at a stoplight on Mallory Avenue. And she was just waiting for the light to turn green, looked up at the sky, saw some clouds, because everybody's always looking at the weather. And she was just looking at the clouds, and then she saw this cylindrical object hovering by the clouds, and it had a series of lights in the middle, and kind of blinking on and off as it was just hovering there. And she just was looking at it going, that's not an airplane. It was defined enough to where she knew it wasn't an airplane, because she said there was no tail wings, there was no major wings, there was no identification as far as, you could see the colors and some of the words. She said it was just hovering, so I know no airplane can just sit there.
And no visible propulsion system.
Right, and this was 1976. So, so anyway, I went to her home and did the investigation as far as the interview. I lived in that same town, so I was very familiar of where she was. Went there to look at it, and I felt that was significant because it was a cylindrical object that was pretty large. And a lot of people like to say that those are motherships.
Right.
So I thought that was a really good case, and that was my first case where someone contacted me about what they had.
Right. Talk about the Navy man you met. You talked about earlier. I mean, that was fascinating, and that's one of the stories you've put in the book.
Yes. So I was working at Peterbilt Motors when I was contacted by somebody that said this guy on the first shift, the day shift, because I worked the swing shift, wanted to talk to me about his experience. So the next day I came in early and went into the building, and because I had told the guy that came to me, and I said, well, tell him to meet me over by the office, by the stairs or whatever. So he met me there, and he just said, well, I hear that you're interested in UFOs. And I said, yes, I like to be able to investigate, and find out what other people are witnessing. And he said, yeah. Well, he just said that he was in now when I took down notes from his interview that I had there, that was a long time ago. And I think I was about 21 years old at the time. And I ended up writing down the interview. But throughout the years when I've moved, some of my stuff got lost.
Yeah.
And I, it's a little upsetting because I like to be able to keep a lot of things that I feel are very important, and that would have been very important to me. But some of the stuff that I had while I had moved, it got lost, and that was one of the things. But he said he was in the Navy, and him and another man were on night watch. And he said they were standing out there talking, smoking a cigarette, and looking out over the ocean. There was a moon out that night, so the water was reflecting the moonlight. So that's why they were able to see. He was able to see a lot of what had happened, because as they were standing there talking and looking out over the ocean, there was a light under the surface, and they kind of were like alerting each other. Look, look, look. They thought it was a sub. And he said that they were getting alarmed because it was like, oh, if this is a sub, or if this is something that we need to go tell the captain and alert everybody. And as they watched this, he said it looked like a flying saucer. He goes, this shit, So I said, okay. And then he said it just came up from under the surface above the water and was hovering. And he said, he was so shocked at seeing the shape of it, like he realized, wait a minute, what's this? And the moonlight kind of shone off of it, so he could see the shape really well. And they were startled. And his friend was like, do you see this, And he was just like, oh my God. So it ended up just zipping away. And they were there quiet for a moment, like, did it? He goes, we didn't speak. We just kind of were stunned. But they talked about, well, should we report this? And they decided not to.
Right.
Because he said, well, who's going to believe us?
Yeah.
He said it came up, it was there hovering, and then it zipped away. And then, like there's no one around.
And it was in the 1970s, and they more than likely would have got a visit from a couple of guys wearing dark suits and dark sunglasses.
Well, I believe it was either in the 50s or the 60s that this occurred.
Right.
Because, again, he was telling me this in 1979.
Okay.
And he was in the Navy, and now he's not. He's working at this company with me on a different shift. So he said, I didn't really tell anybody over the years. And he goes, there's a couple people I did, really close friends. And of course, he said, they didn't really believe him or whatever, but he just wanted to talk to me about it. And then what he did was he says, while I was over in Europe, I picked up Flying Saucer Review, a copy of Flying Saucer Review. It's a magazine that they published over in Europe. And he says, I have that. Do you want it? I said, you don't want it? And he said, well, he goes, it's just sitting there. And he goes, I'll bring it in. I'll give it to you. So he gave me that copy. It was pretty nice. But yeah, but it was very interesting because, a lot of these Navy guys, if there's been a UFO sighting there, and of course, if there's more than just a couple of guys that saw this, they're going to be told to keep quiet about it.
Yeah.
Especially back in those days.
Yeah. Yeah. It does. It can change your whole perspective on life when it happens. And in one instance, in one case you covered more recently in 2017, Henry Sangmaster, who we've spoken to, and we may be presenting that interview maybe before we do this one, but that was in 2017. Classic UFO sighting with Henry, wasn't it?
Yeah, you were cutting up there.
Oh, okay.
I didn't hear the question.
I was just talking about Henry Stangmaster's UFO sighting, and I just said it was just a classic UFO sighting.
Yes. I did a live investigation with him and his, well, she was his fiance at the time, and met them at the sighting location. And it was fascinating because not only did it occur over Aerojet, and they manufactured jet propulsion and fuels, I believe. So when we did the live investigation, I heard both sides, you know, like I talked with Henry and then I talked with Kyra. And I always say that with an investigate, you know, doing an investigation with more than one person, you're going to get this other person's perspective. And perspective for me, and my understanding of it, is people's beliefs, what they experienced in life, and how they perceive things. One of the great examples that I like to give is there was a UFO sighting down in Mexico, and when the investigator asked the man, what shape was it? What did it look like? And his answer was, it looked like a sombrero.
Wow.
So his perspective was, that was what he knows about that shape to describe it. So when I was with Henry and Kyra, talking with Henry mostly, and getting his perspective of, and remembering what he saw, because again, people are going to, when they see something that's unknown, their mind is telling them, oh, it's this. But then when they're looking at it longer, they start to realize, well, wait a minute, that's not an airplane, or that's not, what is that? And then in their mind, they're looking at certain aspects of it. Now he started to talk about the lights. You know, first he saw this green light, and then when it moved over across there's a street there, and when it came down over by the Aerojet property, and there was these three lights with these louvers, they described. When I asked Kyra, and it's in the book, I said, you know, tell me what you thought that was. What, you know, because Henry said, well, he thought at first that those slits by the lights could have been some kind of air duct, you know. And then Kyra was talking about the lights, and she thought, well, maybe they're windows. And I says, very interesting, because Henry thought they were lights. Kyra thought, what if they're windows? And I thought, I love that, because now you're getting different perspectives. And as an investigator, I'm going to take all of that, and I'm going to think about, you know, wow, that's interesting. We don't know if that was really lights or windows, but I'm going to put all that information in there, because that's what I was given by them. Right. I want to say that that's what their perception was, that's what they saw, or that's what they thought.
Even more fascinating with that case was the fact that Henry said there were other people there, and there was plenty of traffic going by, but no one else saw it.
That a lot of times that's usual.
Because I said to him, I said, well, I've had it told to me by plenty of experiences that a UFO can put on a show just for you.
Yep, absolutely, yes. there's a book that was written by Bud Hopkins.
Mm-hmm.
I have it over there. It's called Witnessed.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it was that New York City where she was taken out of the building.
Mm-hmm.
And then only certain people saw it. You
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
So yeah, that happens a lot. And when he said that, like, why didn't anybody see this or stop, or maybe
Yeah.
only they were supposed to see it.
Yeah. Dev, in the book, you say you spent so much time investigating other people's cases, you really didn't stop to think about your own experiences, and you are an experiencer. When did it all start for you?
As far as my experiences,
Yeah.
yeah, well, consciously, it was when I was 11 in 1969. And, something happened, and I knew something strange happened, but I ended up forgetting about it. And that is, I come to find out that a lot of people that has happened, where they'll have an experience and they'll forget about it and then they'll remember it later.
Mm-hmm.
And as my life progressed, I started to have sightings of UFOs, a lot of different paranormal things that were a little freaky, because when you feel like when you're in your house, in your room, you feel safe,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then when things start to happen and it's unexplainable, you don't feel so safe anymore.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's not a good feeling.
Yeah.
So in the book, I was trying to chronicle things that I felt and realized later on in life that were all connected. UFOs, paranormal, ghosts. There's so many things that are connected with this kind of stuff that I started to realize that.
That confirms the massive research by Ray Hernandez and his team with paranormal experiences, and he says they're all connected, from UFOs to ghosts to out of body experiences.
Right. And in the book, I mentioned that I went to the Monroe Institute in '96 because I was fascinated by Robert Monroe when I was reading his books, that there was no such thing as time, and these out of body experiences that he was doing and then teaching via his Monroe Institute on the East Coast. I was really fascinated by that because I really felt I was already doing that, but I wasn't consciously aware.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went to the Monroe Institute for a week to do exercises and learning how to do all that, I quickly realized I was already doing that.
Right.
When at night, because you feel yourself slamming back into your body.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
yeah.
was always going, what the heck is that? A lot of my experiences that were happening, while they were happening, and my sightings, I was in the moment. I was aware of what was going on. I was trying to, like with my sightings, I was mentally, as it was happening, okay, this is in the east, the elevation. I'm watching everything because I don't want to take my eyes off of it, because you don't know how long you have to see this thing. So I don't even bother with where's my phone, my phone, because guess what? My phone will probably either not work, or I'm going to get a really crappy picture of it anyway, because our eyes can really take in a lot more ambient light than any camera. We're really going to be able to see detail. And a lot of people tell me that was when they submit their photographs, I'll say, well, it looks kind of, well, it looks white. And they say, well, that's not what the color was. Well, okay. And they're saying, well, I'm really disappointed that the camera didn't really pick up what I was seeing. I said, absolutely, exactly. And that's why I tell them, I want to know what you saw visually. Never mind, I can see what's on the photograph or in the video. I want to know what you saw visually.
Yeah. All right, well, we're getting close to winding it up here, Dev, but can you talk, or do you want to talk about the regression therapy session you had with Helen Billings back in the early 90s?
Yeah, that was the first time that I went to a hypnotherapist to find out about a few things that bothered me as far as unexplained. UFO magazine, I subscribed to that early on back in the 80s. Vicky Ecker, she started the UFO magazine. So I got my magazine every month, whatever. And in 1990, I was flipping the pages and reading some of the articles, and there was a hypnotherapist here in the Bay Area of California where I was living, and they featured her. And I thought, oh my God, she's right here. She won't think I'm nuts if I go to her.
Yep.
And all this UFO stuff starts coming out. So I made an appointment to go see her, Helen Billings at the time. And she was very good. That was, you know, everybody always wonders if they, oh, I don't know if I can be hypnotized. Well, I kind of thought that at first, but that wasn't even on my mind. What was on my mind was, what am I going to find out?
Yeah, yeah.
And it kind of got a little scary to me.
And do you really want to know?
Well, right. And I just kept thinking about that. So I went and she hypnotized me, and there was a block. When she was trying to get through, there was nothing. I told her, I'm just not seeing any, I don't know, you know, like I can't see anything. I see black, you know. She's just like, well, I feel like you're being blocked. And then she switched it up and said, I'm going to try something. So she said, I want to know, when's the first time you saw a UFO? Well, I know when I consciously first saw a UFO, but that's not what came out of my mouth. And I was surprised, because you are awake. Your mind is awake, but your body's asleep. And I just started to talk about seeing this cylindrical object on a desert floor, and I was like, it was just coming out like it happened and everything. And so I was not understanding at first, like, what was going on. And then she was asking me to look down at myself. And that's when I realized it wasn't me. It was me, but not Dev. You know, it was, I was a Native American boy standing up on a ledge and looking down. And I just started to talk about these canoe people that came and visited our people. And I was so shocked of hearing that, because you can hear yourself talk, but I could also see it in my mind's eye. The whole scene, that it was, I even knew I had this piece of cloth hanging over the front of me, and I knew how that thing was made, and it was just so strange. And I realized, oh, and then it was of a past life, which I was already very interested in, because I did believe in that kind of thing. But she just basically was saying to me, she brought me back out, and you know, she was just saying, let me ask you a question. Are you ready to find out what really was going on with some of these experiences of yours? And I thought about it, because nobody's ever asked me that question. And I said, no, I didn't want to know. At that time, it scared me. I was like, oh, no, I don't think I do. And so that block could have been me or something else. And she said, it's either something else blocking you or it's you, But at that time, I was having so many paranormal instances, and at the time in 1990, a lot of things were going on, and it just,
Well,
you really just want to have a peaceful life. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you want to.
yeah. Well, I was
Everybody
going to say, Dev, before we close it, talk about the strange encounter on the vacation trip that you had in 1992, and then after that there was a blue car incident, and there's just a couple of instances where you've run into paranormal type stuff without really knowing what was going on.
Yeah. So I went on vacation and stayed in a hotel that was near the water, and in the middle of the night, I was first woken up by a smell. It was so strong that it woke me out of sleep. And at first I thought it was a skunk. And I was just like, what's, and ended up turning on the light. My companion was telling me, well, maybe a skunk got in the room. I'm like, that doesn't even make any sense. And I didn't know if it was skunk or sulfur, or I couldn't really identify it, but it was strong. And I was shocked that it woke me out of sleep. And I don't think I put it in the book, but there was a very thin window, very thin opening on the wall to my right.
Yep.
And I happened to look over because I'm trying to figure out in my mind what's going on. And the moon was right in the middle of this slender window. And it wasn't until later, when I started to remember all this stuff and think about it, I felt that was, what are the odds that the moon was square in that thin window? And I don't know if I put that in the book, but it was really kind of weird. But I went back to bed. I heard glass breaking, got up again looking for the source. This room had all wicker furniture. There wasn't anything that could be broken. I looked at the windows. I looked outside on the patio because there was a small table with an ashtray. Everything was intact. I went to look at the ice to think, oh, maybe the ice is cracking, but it was already melted. And I just started to get frightened because now I'm starting to feel a presence. And I don't want to turn the lights off because I'm scared. And my friend, she's just like, oh my God, I just want to go home. I go, it's like in the middle of the night. I'm not leaving and driving Highway 1.
Yeah.
In the middle of the night. But I finally got the courage to shut the light off. And I'm laying there and I'm just saying to myself, go to sleep because I can't, I'm too scared for anything else. And I had this overwhelming feeling that somebody was there. And I opened my eyes, and at the end of the bed was a hooded figure, very short, small. And I couldn't see the face, but I was just like, oh my God. And I just closed my eyes and I just saw, like, I don't know if it was fear or what, but I just saw white. And then that was the last thing I remembered till the next morning.
Wow.
And then we just want to get out of there because it was such a strange night. And I'm driving, and Highway 1 is, kind of there's areas where there isn't any roads
Yeah.
that you can come in. And it was a beautiful morning, just quiet, the radio wasn't on. I was lost in my thoughts, and I'm watching the road. Because I told myself I better pay attention to this road because there's curves and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked down for a split second, looked back up, and now there's a car there. There was nobody around when I was driving. Nobody behind me, nobody in front of me, nothing. And when I looked down for that split second, it was like, I said to my friend, I said, where did this car come from? She said, I don't know. I go, did you see it come onto the road?
Huh.
She goes, no. And I go, there's no way that it could got on the road without me seeing it. And she said, oh my God, don't stop. Don't stop till we get to a major city. Let's just keep going. Let's get out of here. But it was really freaky, like.
Well, that was certainly fascinating. What about the blue car incident you talk about in the book? And then we'll have to close it up.
Yeah, so that happened on Highway 16. Again, a very desolate area. I had about 3 other people in the car with me. I was the driver. We were going up to Jackson to meet family members for a dinner, and an early dinner. And this was in the summertime, so of course it's daylight out. So I'm driving, and I'm talking, we're all kind of like talking a little bit. And I wanted to get there early because I wanted to pick my seat at the big table at the restaurant. So I wanted to just hurry up and get there. So I was driving pretty good. And this is a one lane, one lane road out in the middle of nowhere. And I'm flying now. I'm driving really fast, and I come upon a blue car, a powder blue car, and it's an older model. It's kind of a nice one. Probably some guy had a nice vintage car.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going, oh my God, I say out loud, oh my God, this guy's in my way. And they're saying, pass him up. So I let a little bit of room go in, and then I floor it and I pass him up. And I look in the rearview mirror, and I'm leaving him in the dust, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm going and I'm flying. Well, we come to the small town of Martell, and I see the sign saying, prepare to stop, because there's some kind of road work going on. And I go, oh, really? Come on. So we come up, and I stop, and, there's a couple of cars in front of me. And in front of me was that blue car.
Wow.
And I said, because at first I was just sitting there, and we're waiting, because there was a flag man letting us in and out, whatever. And I'm looking at the car in front of me, and I'm going, wait a minute. And I say out loud, guys, isn't that the blue car I passed up miles behind? And they're just going, what? And I go, I'm freaking out. I'm going, oh my God, what's going on? And they're going, oh my God, there's no way. And then, they realize that, how did he get in front of us?
Did he know a dimensional shortcut?
I don't know what happened there.
And
I know what it was, because that car was unusual because it was more of a vintage car. It wasn't just like every other car back in those days that were on the road.
Yeah.
That color, that powder blue color, and that style, that vintage, there was no way he could have passed me, and he didn't, that I saw.
And Devin, they're just a couple of instances of things that you've experienced throughout your life, and people can find out more by picking up a copy of your book, UFO Investigator. And as you mentioned, it's a personal look.
Yes, and it's on Amazon. And yeah, I would encourage everybody to check it out. I think you'll really enjoy chapters 3 through 6 that have 30 of my cases, and there are pictures. What I did was I got some artists to do a few renditions of some of the cases. I wanted the book to be in color because I think it's important to see this stuff in color, especially if the witnesses talked about different colors of
Yeah.
that were seen.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's why I wanted the book not to be black and white.
Right. Right.
And of course, that costs a little more money, but I
Yeah.
think it's all worth it when you see it in color.
Yeah.
So,
And for those people watching and listening and wanting to become a UFO investigator, contact Mufon and basically bring your passion.
exactly. Yeah, it's really, I really love being able to talk to different people and listen to their stories, and we're all in this together. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like minds,
Yep. Yep. Well, Dev, thank you. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you today.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dean.
Dev Rugne joining us on Aliens Revealed Live.